It may sound strange, but sometimes the reason we feel exhausted isn't because life is too heavy. It's because we never learned we could put some of it down. There are people who move through their days smiling, answering messages, showing up on time. Yet inside they feel as if they're walking underwater. If that quiet heaviness has been following you for years, you might have started to believe it's simply who you are. But what if the tightness in your chest isn't a life sentence, only a signal that something wants to be released? And what if relief could begin not with changing your whole life, but with one gentle shift you can feel in a single breath? This story is about a man who discovered that the weight he carried wasn't proof of strength, only proof of habit. He didn't escape his past, fix everything, or become someone new overnight. Instead, he learned something most of us were never taught, that peace returns the moment we stop gripping what hurts. As you listen, you may recognize pieces of yourself in the quiet corners of his journey, because sometimes the path back to breathing freely starts the moment you realize you were never meant to carry it all alone. For years, he moved through his days as if a quiet winter lived on his shoulders. No one else seemed to notice the invisible backpack he carried, yet it pressed into him all the same. Morning routines felt oddly slow, like walking through shallow water fully dressed. Even laughter came out careful, as though joy itself might be too heavy to lift. Somewhere inside, he couldn't quite remember what it felt like to wake up light. Ordinary moments asked more of him than they should have. A short conversation could leave him tired, a small mistake echo for hours. He'd sit on the edge of his bed at night, loosening his collar just to breathe a little deeper. It puzzled him, honestly. How could a life that looked so normal feel so weighed down? Still, he carried on, because setting it down never seemed like an option. Sometimes he paused at red lights and watched people crossing the street freely. They walked as if the air belonged to them, shoulders easy, steps unhurried. He wondered, not bitterly, just quietly, what it would be like to move that way. To inhale without that tight band around his chest pulling the breath short. To feel open, unguarded, like windows finally unstuck after a long season. On certain evenings, when the world softened and sounds faded, a longing stirred. Not for a different life, exactly. Just for a lighter way of standing inside this one. He'd place a hand over his chest, half aware of the weight resting there. It wasn't sharp pain, more like a constant pressure he'd grown used to ignoring. And yet his body seemed to whisper that breathing shouldn't be this hard. A strange thought began visiting him then, almost shy at first. What if the heaviness wasn't entirely his to carry? What if some of those stones in that unseen backpack had been placed there by moments long gone? He didn't know how to test that idea, but it lingered, gentle and persistent, as if something, or someone, might soon show him how to loosen the straps. Not long after that thought began to linger, he noticed something else. Each time he exhaled slowly, really slowly, the backpack seemed to loosen just a little. It wasn't dramatic, more like a knot easing after years of being pulled tight. He started wondering if the weight responded to what he allowed himself to feel, as though guilt and regret were the hands quietly gripping the straps. He tested it in small, almost secret ways. When an old memory surfaced, instead of pushing it away, he whispered, "It's all right." The words felt unfamiliar, like trying on a coat that didn't quite belong to him yet. Still, his chest expanded a fraction more than before, enough to notice. It surprised him how much space a little gentleness could create. Breathing, he realized, wasn't just air moving in and out. It was permission to soften, to stop bracing, to unclench what had been clenched for years. With every slow inhale, something inside him leaned toward openness. With every exhale, a thin layer of pressure seemed to peel away. He began to suspect that relief might be quieter than he had imagined. Letting go, he discovered, didn't erase the past the way he once feared. The memories remained, but they stopped pressing so sharply against him. It was like loosening his grip on a rope that had been burning his hands. He hadn't dropped it completely, just stopped pulling against it. And oddly enough, the pain lessened the moment he did. A calm idea settled in his mind, steady as a slow tide. Perhaps peace wasn't something earned through endurance after all. Perhaps it began when he allowed himself to set down what punishment had kept in place. He didn't yet know how to release the deeper stones buried at the bottom. But somewhere ahead, he sensed, someone would show him where to begin. He had once believed the backpack gave him structure, something to lean into when life felt uncertain. Without it, who would he be? Just a man walking around with empty hands. So he kept tightening the straps, telling himself responsibility was supposed to feel heavy. Yet the weight had a way of bending his posture until even hope looked down at the floor. People called him strong, not noticing how tired strength had made him. His days were shaped by quiet calculations. How much energy to spend, how many words to say, how long he could pretend he was fine. A careless comment from someone could add another stone without them ever knowing. He'd nod politely, then carry the echo of it for hours, sometimes days. It amazed him how loud a single memory could become inside a silent room. Grief lived there too, tucked between ordinary obligations. Not dramatic grief, the quiet kind that settles into corners and stays. He avoided certain streets, certain songs, certain dates on the calendar. Each avoidance added another layer to the invisible load pressing into his shoulders. He told himself it was easier than opening what might spill out. Late at night, when the world stopped asking things of him, fear crept closer. If the backpack disappeared, would all the reasons he kept going vanish with it? The burden had become proof that he cared, that he remembered, that he was still accountable. Setting it down felt suspiciously like betrayal of others, of the past, of himself. So he held on, even as his hands quietly trembled from the strain. And yet, on a morning that looked no different from the rest, something shifted. He caught his reflection in a window and barely recognized the man staring back. There was a question in those tired eyes, one he could no longer ignore. Not how did this happen, but how long do you plan to carry this? He didn't know the answer, only that the day seemed to be leading him somewhere unfamiliar. That unfamiliar direction revealed itself in the form of a dull, constant ache across his shoulders. It was the day he finally became aware of the backpack as more than a feeling. In his mind's eye, it appeared clearly. Worn fabric, heavy seams, filled with uneven stones. Some were smooth, others sharp-edged, all pressing downward with quiet insistence. He realized he had been adjusting its weight for years without ever looking inside. When he walked, the straps tightened against his chest like a firm, unyielding band. Deep breaths caught halfway, as if the air had to negotiate its way in. He found himself leaning forward, compensating for a load no one else could see. It explained the exhaustion that sleep never seemed to cure. Even stillness required effort when something was always pulling you down. He imagined what it would feel like to slide it off just for a moment. The thought alone made his shoulders twitch, unsure whether to relax or brace. A strange nervousness followed, like stepping into a room without knowing the rules. Who was he without the familiar pressure anchoring him to the ground? The backpack had become both burden and strange companion. One afternoon, he sat on a park bench and pretended to loosen an invisible strap. Just a small movement, barely noticeable to anyone passing by. His chest expanded unexpectedly, and he let out a breath that sounded almost startled. It felt as if a window had cracked open in a long sealed room. He quickly adjusted his posture again, unsure if he was allowed to feel that. Still, the sensation lingered, a hint of space where tightness used to be. He began to suspect the backpack responded to attention, not force. That maybe it had been waiting for him to acknowledge it all along. As the sun dipped lower, someone approached the bench with an ease he couldn't help noticing. And for the first time, he wondered what it might be like to meet a person who carried nothing at all. The person who approached the bench moved with an unhurried ease, as if time itself had softened around them. They sat nearby, leaving a respectful space, yet their presence felt quietly reassuring. He noticed their shoulders first, relaxed, open, untouched by the invisible strain he knew so well. It puzzled him how someone could look so light without seeming careless or detached. After a while, they glanced over and smiled, the kind that didn't ask for anything back. "You look like you've been carrying something heavy for a long time," they said gently. He almost laughed at the accuracy of it, though the sound caught in his throat. No one had ever named it so simply, without judgment or concern. He hesitated, then gave a small nod, unsure how much to reveal to a stranger. The backpack seemed to tighten, as if wary of being noticed. The mentor tilted their head slightly, studying him with quiet curiosity. "Do you remember when you first put it on?" they asked, not unkindly. He searched his memory and found only fragments. A mistake here, a loss there, a promise he couldn't keep. It dawned on him that he'd stopped questioning its presence a long time ago. Habit, he realized, can feel a lot like necessity when it goes on long enough. They told him some people carry weight because it feels safer than emptiness. That letting go can seem like stepping into open air without knowing if the ground will appear. He felt seen in a way that was both comforting and unsettling. His hands rested on his knees, resisting the urge to grip the imaginary straps. Part of him wanted to defend the burden, as though it were an old friend. Sometimes, the mentor added softly, the body forgets it's allowed to rest. They demonstrated by lifting their shoulders, then letting them fall with a slow exhale. Without thinking, he mirrored the movement, surprised by the warmth spreading through his chest. For a brief second, the backpack loosened enough for him to feel the difference, and he sensed that this quiet stranger might be the one to show him what came next. Many of the stories you hear here aren't just stories. They reflect the invisible weight you may be carrying every day. If you're tired of holding pain, responsibility, and guilt that were never yours, I created an ebook called The Weight of Stones That Are Not Yours and More Too Bonus for you. It's for those who want to let go, set boundaries, and live with more lightness. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. The mentor watched him for a moment, as if waiting for his breath to settle into its own rhythm. Most burdens, they said softly, aren't released by strength, but by forgiveness. The word landed gently, yet it stirred something he had kept tightly sealed. He shifted on the bench, uncertain whether forgiveness was meant for others or himself. The backpack pressed closer, almost defensive, as though it recognized the conversation. They reached toward the air near his shoulder, miming the careful removal of a stone. Start small, they suggested, as if showing him how to untie a knot. He closed his eyes and pictured one regret he revisited far too often. With a slow exhale, he imagined placing that stone on the ground beside his feet. His chest opened in a way that felt both relieving and strangely tender. Breathing deeply is how you make room for what was crowded out, the mentor continued. They invited him to inhale through his nose, then release the air like a quiet sigh. He followed, awkward at first, then more naturally, like remembering a forgotten language. Each breath seemed to carve out a small clearing inside him. He hadn't realized how little space he'd been living in until now. They explained that letting go didn't mean pretending nothing had happened. It meant choosing not to relive it every day as if it still held authority. He pictured loosening the straps further, one careful movement at a time. The backpack remained, but it no longer felt fused to his identity. For the first time, he sensed the difference between carrying and clinging. As the evening air cooled, he sat a little straighter without forcing it. The mentor rose slowly, as though confident he could manage the next steps alone. Practice with the lighter stones first, they said, offering a reassuring nod. He watched them walk away, their steps quiet and unburdened, and there on the bench he wondered which stone he might dare to set down tomorrow. The next morning he woke before the alarm, aware of a subtle difference he couldn't quite name. The backpack was still there, of course, but it no longer felt welded to his bones. He sat on the edge of the bed and practiced removing a small stone. Yesterday's awkward conversation. With a quiet breath out, he imagined placing it on the floor beside his slippers. A faint lightness spread through him, fragile, but unmistakably real. Throughout the day, he experimented in modest, almost invisible ways. When a memory tried to pull him backward, he paused instead of following it. Sometimes he pressed his hand gently to his chest, reminding himself he was here now. The unfamiliar openness made him nervous, like walking without a railing for the first time. Still, each step proved the ground was steady enough to hold him. There were moments of vulnerability that caught him off guard. A kind word made his eyes sting. A quiet room felt wider than before. Without the usual pressure, emotions rose freely, unsure where to settle. He worried he might dissolve into softness if he wasn't careful. Yet the mentor's calm voice echoed somewhere inside, steady as a hand on his shoulder. By evening, he noticed his posture had changed without permission. He stood a little taller, as though his spine had remembered its original design. Walking home, he realized he could see farther ahead instead of staring at the ground. Even the air felt different, easier to welcome into his lungs. It startled him how much space the world contained when he wasn't folded inward. As days passed, the backpack grew lighter in ways that felt both freeing and uncertain. He found himself glancing back occasionally, half expecting the weight to return all at once. But it didn't. It loosened gradually, respectfully, as if honoring his courage. And just when he began to trust this new rhythm, life placed an old reminder in his path, the kind that once would have added stones faster than he could breathe. The reminder came on an ordinary afternoon, disguised as a familiar voice calling his name. Someone from his past approached, carrying memories he had spent years avoiding. For a moment, his shoulders tensed, instinctively preparing for the old weight to return. He could almost feel the stones shifting inside the backpack, ready to multiply. But then he remembered the bench, the breath, the quiet permission to pause. Instead of rushing to defend himself, he listened, really listened. The conversation was awkward, unfinished in places, softer in others. A few words stung, the way careless honesty sometimes does. Yet he noticed the pain moved through him, rather than settling in his chest. It was uncomfortable, yes, but not crushing the way it once would have been. When silence fell between them, he inhaled slowly, letting the air fill the space. He imagined loosening another strap, just enough to keep his balance. Acceptance arrived not as surrender, but as a steady ground beneath his feet. He didn't need to rewrite the past or carry it forward. He only needed to stand there without adding new stones. Something in his calm seemed to ripple outward. The other person's voice softened, their posture easing without explanation. It was as if his lightness had quietly invited theirs to surface too. He realized then that burdens aren't only personal, they pass between people when left unattended. And sometimes, releasing one end of the rope is enough to change the tension entirely. As they parted ways, he felt the backpack settle into a gentler shape against his back. Not empty, not gone, but no longer in charge of where he could go. He walked on with a steadiness that surprised him, almost like trust returning home. A passerby caught his eye and smiled, sensing something quietly different, and he wondered how many others were waiting for permission to set their own weight down. That evening, he sat by the window, watching the sky fade into softer colors. The day had left a gentle quiet inside him, like a room finally aired out. He slipped the backpack from his shoulders just enough to rest it beside the chair. No grand gesture, just a small act of trust in the silence around him. For the first time, he noticed how light his breathing felt without effort. He remembered the mentor's voice and decided to try something simple. One slow inhale through the nose, as if drawing in calm from the air itself. Then a long, steady exhale, imagining tension dissolving like mist. He pictured a single stone rolling out of the backpack and settling harmlessly on the floor. The release was subtle, but his chest expanded with quiet gratitude. Curious, he tried again, this time naming the weight he was loosening. A harsh word someone had spoken, replayed too many times to count. He exhaled and let the memory drift away like a leaf on water. His shoulders softened, surprised by how willing the body was to cooperate. It felt less like effort and more like remembering something natural. He began to understand that heaviness returns in waves, not as punishment. So he made a quiet agreement with himself to meet it gently each time. A breath, a pause, a small loosening of the straps. Nothing dramatic. Practices so simple they could be done between two heartbeats. Little doorways back to the openness he had nearly forgotten. As night settled, he rested his hand on the backpack, no longer resentful. It had carried what he didn't yet know how to put down. Now it felt less like a burden and more like a reminder of what he'd learned. He closed his eyes, breathing slowly, sensing space where pressure used to live, and somewhere in that quiet, a new understanding waited to unfold with the morning. Morning arrived gently, as if the day itself had learned not to rush him anymore. He stepped outside carrying the backpack, though it rested lightly now, almost respectfully. The air felt wider, the sky less like a ceiling and more like an invitation. For a moment he simply stood there, breathing as though the world had made room for him. It struck him that freedom hadn't arrived all at once, but in quiet permissions. He understood then that the deepest change had been invisible, not the removal of every stone, but the willingness to set them down when they hurt. Pain no longer needed to be carried as proof of love or responsibility. A lighter heart didn't erase what mattered. It allowed it to flow instead of stagnate. He felt life moving through him again, unblocked and quietly alive. As he walked, he noticed small details he might have missed before. Sunlight touching windows, leaves shifting in a mild breeze, distant laughter. These weren't grand revelations, just gentle signs of openness returning. He realized how much beauty had been hidden behind the weight he insisted on holding. It wasn't that the world had changed. He had made space to experience it. At the park, he paused near the bench where everything had begun. The memory of the mentor felt less like nostalgia and more like a steady presence. He sat down, placed the backpack beside him, and left it there for a while. Nothing terrible happened. The ground didn't disappear beneath him. He even smiled, surprised by how natural that felt. When he finally stood, he lifted the backpack again, not as a burden, but as a choice. He knew now he could set it down whenever he needed to breathe. Freedom, he realized, begins the moment we stop punishing ourselves for being human. With steady steps, he walked forward into the open day, shoulders unguarded. And somewhere ahead, life waited, spacious, patient, and ready to be lived lightly.